Preseason wins it in overtime.
Brady can drop, breakaway shoots, scores!
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to SENS TALK. I'm your host, Brandon Plant. We got a special episode today with two great SENS TALK contributors. We have Derek Lee and Noah Luden here today. The preview, the Senator training camp and preseason. By the way, we're recording this on Sunday, September 24th, just before Ottawa drops the puck to open the preseason against the Toronto Maple Leafs. But that shouldn't change much because today we're going to take a look at some intriguing battles to watch in the preseason. But before we get into that, let's just see how the guys here are doing. Derek, Noah, how are you doing, my friends?
Can't complain.
Same here. Yeah, feeling good. Excited to get the season going. Finally, some hockey is here. I know preseason isn't really, everyone's favorite thing to watch, but like you said, I'm excited to focus on a few battles.
It's just nice to have hockey back.
I would put myself in the crowd that doesn't get so excited about all the preseason stuff. But that being said, there's a lot of, especially for, a team that's actually trying to make the playoffs now, rather than, the years past where it's just another year with a bad team and you don't really have to worry about any part of the season. But now it's, this is a team that's really looking to make the playoffs. So there's a lot of interesting roster spots that need to be fought for and all that. So I'll be watching preseason games this year for sure.
Without a doubt. And look, the top six, the top four, the goaltending tandem, it's all set. When you're a playoff team looking to make the playoffs, those positions should be essentially, there's no argument about it. They're solidified. But the bottom six, the bottom pairing, those are different conversations. So let's kick it off right now with our first battle we're going to preview. Let's take a look at the fourth line. And this is a really intriguing one because there are only 3 spots available on that fourth line. And there's probably, give or take, 5 or 6 players vying for those 3 spots. Now, I want to mention something rather quickly. There's 1 player, or even 2, I'll say, that are guaranteed to be starting on that fourth line for the Ottawa Senators this year, in my opinion. That would, of course, be Mark Kaslick. This guy is an absolute beauty. This is exactly what you want from a fourth-line center. He's a 58% faceoff rate kind of guy. That is very rare in the National Hockey League. The NHL average is just hovering around 50%. Winning 6 out of 10 faceoffs, essentially, is incredible for any center, let alone your fourth-line center, who will likely be quite often in the defensive zone, and that will help Ottawa win a lot of possession. So Mark Kaslick is a guaranteed guy on that fourth line, on the fourth-line center position. On the right wing and the left wing, this is where things kind of get a little interesting. I mean, Zach McEwen on that right wing is something I can see happening for sure. He didn't sign here for 3 years. And if Ottawa didn't see him as a staple on that fourth line, at least for this year, and if he wasn't going to be there. So I think Zach McEwen's another guy that you should expect on that fourth line, kind of replacing Austin Watson with that rough and tough kind of game there. You know what I'm saying? So McEwen probably there on the fourth line as well. And Claude Giroux, by the way, has been raving about him so far in camp. Former teammate of his over in Philadelphia. So I'm excited to see him play. This is the kind of guy that you need when you have stars on your team, remember. You got Stützle, you got Tkachuk, you got Norris, Batherson, Shabbat, Sanderson, the list goes on. You need somebody on that fourth line that's not afraid to drop him. So McEwen's that guy. You got Kaslick there. But then you have a couple positions here. Who's going to be the 13th forward? Who's going to be on that left wing? And by the way, McEwen can go to the left wing as well. So when I say he's on the right side, he's not locked in there. He's just going to be on one of those 2 spots. So now you have a few options here. You have Parker Kelly, who played majority of the year last year on that fourth line. But has he really proved that he's going to be a full-time NHLer next year? Has he really proved that he should be guaranteed a spot? I say no. I liked the guy a couple years ago. I thought he was fantastic. And we'll talk about this in a few minutes when we have this conversation together. But with Parker Kelly, I mean, he didn't impress last year. 16 points in his last 96 games. It's just not doing it, especially when Ottawa's bottom 6 last year really held them back at points. So Parker Kelly's going to have to battle with the likes of a Josh Bailey, for example, on a PTO, a guy that scored 26 points last year in roughly 60-65 games with the New York Islanders. He's 34 years old, but he is a former good point producer. I mean, he scored 40 points a couple of years ago. He scored 60-70 points only a few years ago. He's not the fastest skater. He's not the most physical player. Don't get me wrong. But a guy like that who scored 25 points last year, would have been number 1 in the bottom 6 for point production. Number 2 behind Bailey would have been Derek Brassard, who's not on this team. So he is an upgrade for sure. No matter how you like him or not, he is an upgrade. He might be there as that 13th forward, and we'll discuss this. He might even get in for at least half the games on that 4th or maybe 3rd line, which Derek you'll talk about in a second or two. But as well, you got guys like Igor Sharkolov just signed for 1 year. The writing's on the wall. He needs to have a big year here and, to really push for the National Hockey League here, because if he doesn't make the NHL roster with Ottawa by this time next year, he'll probably be with another team. I hope I'm wrong about that, though. And then you got guys like Yuri Smejkal, brought in over from Europe, was really good in the SHL last year. Of course, 49 games played, 43 points. I mean, that's another guy that's going to compete, a power forward. And then you have other prospects, like I mentioned already, like Kelly, and then Cruikshank, Venti Boucher, Highmore, and Boku Imama as well. So there's a lot of guys that can be in that 4th line as call-ups or whatever. But the ones you're really looking at are Kaslik and McEwen, for sure. Bailey, likely. He's on a PTO, remember? And then one of Sokolov, Smejkal, that kind of thing. What do you guys think?
I have a log jam a little bit. I mean, it's a good problem to have. Too many good, quality, it seems, 4th line forwards. I would be shocked. It kind of makes this McEwen contract a little weird because, you look at all the other options that we have. It doesn't seem like you needed to sign him for 3 years. But listen, if they see something out of him, they want an Austin Watson kind of guy. And even though Austin Watson had his flaws with us, he definitely brought some great moments. He was a great shot blocker. He did a lot of good things for the Ottawa Center, and he scored a decent amount for a guy on the 4th line. So I think he was our best scorer on the 4th line.
I think he's the leading scorer, or was.
I think so. Over the Park, he was way more than Parker Kelly. Parker Kelly had 1 goal last year. He had a little more than Kastelik. Kastelik was great though. That's, I think, when I look at the 4th line on this team and the potential names that you can put on there, I think Mark Kastelik is the only guy that I can point out as the lock. I don't think I can see Zach McEwen as a lock. There's just too many, we haven't seen him at all. And even though he has this 3-year deal, I mean, it's only less than $1 million, right? I don't think it's that much. So I wouldn't even call him a lock. I want to see him play before anything else. I mean, you never know. Maybe Sokolov just has improved in the offseason and he looks really good. And that just, changes the whole landscape of this conversation. Maybe Boko Imama has a great preseason. Matthew Highmore, another guy who does great. There's a lot of options for Ottawa. So I don't know if I can really say. I mean, Parker Kelly too. Parker Kelly could have some resurgence. You just don't know. I don't believe it, but there's a lot of guys fighting for 2 or 3 spots. It's very interesting for the 4th line.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. It's a real intriguing battle. I think for me, this is the one line that gives me the most concern, if I'm being genuine and honest. I think entering the season, I'm with Noah. I mean, Casti is someone that clearly earned that spot last year, and he's the one guy that solidified his spot this year. Great face-off percentage, which I think you touched on in your intro there, Brandon. So yeah, outside of Casti, not feeling a whole lot of confidence in terms of what McEwen brings. Looking at the analytics, it's scary. And it does, if I'm being genuine here, it does bring me some concern. The concern would be how much these guys are going to eat in terms of minutes, because you could play with, a subpar 4th line if you can compensate for that 4th line with your 3rd line and et cetera. And I think the Senators outside of that 4th line have a very good, well-constructed roster. My concern is that, initially I thought they moved on from Austin Watson because he didn't, really provide what they were looking for from a 4th line presence. And then they replaced him with McEwen, who is not as good as Austin Watson. And I think they just ran out of money, to be honest with you. So it's an interesting situation. Parker Kelly, to both your point, I don't think he's earned it just yet. He is going to get the first look at camp. That's the other interesting note here, is that currently DJ is rolling a line of Kelly, Casti, and McEwen. So it looks like those 3 are getting the first kind of look together. Bailey's the interesting one, because I think Bailey, in my mind, is auditioning for the third line, but could he perhaps audition for the fourth line as well? That could change the fourth line for me. It would certainly strengthen the fourth line.
Basically replacing Brassard, right? Like
Literally, yeah.
He could just he's just auditioning to be Derek Brassard. And it's sad that I would love to have Derek Brassard back. Honestly, he was great last year. It's, tough that we couldn't bring him back, but Derek Brassard was so great for the Sens for the 2 stints that he had with us. I can't even be mad, but Josh Bailey, we could just be having another veteran with a lot of good reputation around the league. It's just a solid NHL player. He'll work hard. He'll get some points. And I think that would have been that'd be a great move for us if we can get him on that third line. But for the fourth, I mean, I just, you always come back to the contract situation that the Sens are having right now. And it just doesn't help that they signed a guy like McEwen to 3 years. I don't get it yet. Maybe I will get it, but maybe we'll see this Kelly, Kastelik, McEwen line is just gonna pop off and be the best fourth line ever. We'll see. It just sounds like Kelly, Watson, and Kastelik. That's what it sounds like.
And that's why I'm intrigued to watch that line today against the Leafs in preseason. They've been together throughout camp, and just remember, DJ Smith has said, don't pay attention to the lines in camp. But this is like the only line that's been consistently together. So how do we not kind of take notice of that? So I'm really intrigued to see if they play well together, and if they don't, who gets the opportunity there on that line? Because Kastelik's going to be there for sure. But does Kelly get switched out for, a Bailey or a Smejkal, or does McEwen get moved out for Igor Sokolov? And while we're going to throw it to the third line conversation in second, Derek, because I know you wanted to talk about that, and there's a lot of interesting stuff there. Just on the Josh Bailey point, I think he will be signed for league minimum. He's a guy that could have got a contract probably anywhere else. He signed a PTO, probably because of the Ottawa Center cap situation. I don't see how we don't sign him, I'll be honest with you. Because once again, like Noah said, this guy's got good pedigree around the league. He would have got a contract somewhere else for sure, at least a two-way deal, right? So I don't doubt that. And I like Josh Bailey purely because, look, like he's not in his prime. Let's not overhype the guy. That being said, he's a Swiss Army knife kind of guy. He can go throughout that third and fourth line. Let's say Sokolov makes the team. And by the way, 59 points, 21 goals in 70 AHL games last year. He's got nothing left to prove. He should make this team. He has been working on his skating with Shelly Kettles in the offseason. He should improve his skating. So let's say you have Bailey and Sokolov there. Those are 2 goal scorers or point producers that can switch throughout that bottom 6. So Ottawa definitely has options. I think the dark horse here is we keep on talking about McEwen. We keep on talking about Bailey. And we're going to talk about Joseph and Greg and Pinto and Kubalik in just a couple minutes here. But Yuri Smejkal, he got brought over from Europe. Ottawa scouted this guy overseas and said, yeah, we want that guy. We want him. Now, he's on a 2-way deal, so there's no guarantee, and it's more likely than not he will be sent down to Belleville. But he's got the size. He's got the pro experience. He can truly make a mark here in preseason. Who knows? Maybe he's that guy on that fourth line on that left wing. He's got the size. Remember, Ottawa likes to play a rough and tough style of hockey with DJ Smith at the helm, which is totally fine. But you want to have somebody that can score and use their body to produce points. Honestly, no one in that bottom 6 can do so, except really Yuri Smejkal. So he uses his body to score a lot of points. So if he can do that here in preseason, I could absolutely see him sneaking in there on that fourth line, especially with a guy like Parker Kelly being able to sneak through waivers, or Zach McEwen on that kind of contract. I don't think they'll send him down just because I don't know how that would be in the locker room. But if they did, it wouldn't hurt that much. The point very simply is there's a lot of players here for that fourth line on 2-way deals. There's going to be a lot of rotations around. Like I think Noah and you, Derek, said, Kastelik's the lone lock. And I think this camp's going to be really intriguing. So I think Sokolov, Smejkal, Bailey, McEwen, Kelly, they have 2 spots to fight for. Bailey and Sokolov are in a better position purely because, and Derek, you're going to take it away here in a second, but purely because both of those guys could even be on that third line and help produce points. So speaking of that third line, Derek, what are your battles there?
Yeah, there's a number of guys, again, battling for just, in my mind, just one spot on the third line. So currently, I guess you're going to construct the third line differently. The obvious is that Shane Pinto has not yet been signed on September 24th. So we're looking to hopefully have Shane Pinto here because he is obviously a lock third line center. and had 20 goals last season. So currently, I mean, I would construct it with Kubalik, Greg, and Joseph based on who's here right now, with Ridley Gregg getting the opportunity to play in the middle. But it really is going to be who's going to be the guy moved out after Pinto is signed. And I think that's the kind of the question that's hanging over these battles. But right now we have to focus on who's here and who's in camp and who's battling for those positions. So right now, Kubalik is obviously a lock. He's a 20-goal guy. He's a lock. He was acquired in the Alex DeBrincat trade. Brings a lot to the table in terms of his finishing abilities. Outside of those finishing abilities, there's a lot more that other guys bring to the table. And I think that's where on Twitter right now, it's a hot debate, right? Like people are debating, do you move out Kubalik or do you move out Joseph? And the thing with Joseph is that he does provide you a little bit more balance. And I think that's what people are pointing out. So if you look analytically, like Joseph is in the 80th percentile defensively. He's also in the 85th percentile from a PK perspective. And that's a role that the Senators will have a hard time filling if Joseph is moved out. And Kubalik doesn't have strengths in those areas. He's stronger in goal scoring. So it's kind of, what do you want on your team, really, when it comes to that conversation? Ridley Gregg is going to have to battle for his spot as well. So right now he's going to have a lock due to Pinto not being here. That's not going to be the case. He's really one of those guys vying for a wing position. So Gregg is looking very good at this stage, I would say. Certainly off the ice, he's put in the work. I think he came second or third behind Sanderson in fitness testing overall, which is great. He looked really good at the rookie game. I think he looked pretty good at the one rookie game that they allowed him to play in. There was a little bit of concern, and he plays that style where, it's likely that he's not going to play 82 games just based on the rough and tumble style that he does play. And we have a little bit of a sample. He did play some games last year. He had 20 games played in the NHL. He wasn't overly productive. I think he missed on a couple of good quality opportunities when he was playing with Claude Giroux. He's not going to get that opportunity, I don't think, very much this year, but he will get some opportunity on the third line. The reality is all of these players, if Joseph is still here or Kubalik is still here, will get a look. It's just kind of who's going to start in that role. And I think, those are the guys that have that opportunity. It'll be interesting. Bailey's another guy you mentioned for a fourth line role. I think he's also vying for what could be a third line role on this team. I did listen to DJ Smith yesterday, just talking about Josh Bailey, comparing him to Derek Brassard. He also has experience coaching Josh Bailey. So there's a relationship there that I think people probably need to keep an eye on, and that'll be interesting. Bailey, his biggest struggles are even strength defense, interestingly, because he has a lot of strength on the PK, and that's his biggest strength. So it's weird how the two don't go hand in hand, but his 5-on-5 defense, he's in the 5th percentile. So that's not looking so good from an analytics perspective.
Like me, for example, that aren't the most inclined or in the know with advanced analytics, why don't you explain what those percentiles mean exactly? Just so people can get an understanding, because that stat you just pointed out is a big one.
Yeah, so the game is now broken down in every single I guess in a format that identifies everything. So for example, 5-on-5 play at even strength, 5-on-4 play on the power play, on the PK. It's broken down in each different area and measured and then compiled for a WAR metric, which gives you like an overall metric based on everything. So Bailey overall, and this is according to Jay Fresh, and there's many different sources. The thing is that there's a lot of similarities, so you can look at different sources to get, I guess, a more accurate depiction of who that player is, and also watch the player play. And that's the other piece that I think people miss. So according to Jay Fresh, he's in the 13th percentile for WAR metrics, which is pretty low. So defensive play, 5-on-5, he's in the 5th percentile. So that means that 95% of the league is better at 5-on-5 defense than Josh Bailey. So that's a tough one. That's a tough one to swallow. So yeah, I can't explain like in great detail how they come up with that metric. But these are the numbers, I guess, that are out there, and they're relatively similar when you look at different models as well. So there's some similarities.
You would have to think that part of this puzzle with whether you move Joseph or whether you move Kubalik is maybe you find in this fourth line battle, you find some guys who can kill penalties like real well. And I know that was a role that Parker Kelly had last year for the majority of the season. Maybe they can find some guys who are better, and maybe if you find might be a situation where you find a good penalty killing group, okay, we can part with Joseph, or you can't find a good penalty killing group. Okay, we got to keep Joseph, Kubalik. I would hate to trade Kubalik away. I really would.
Before watching him play, I mean,
exactly.
That would suck.
We traded a guy in Alex DeBrincat, a 40-goal scorer, and even though we obviously did not have his greatest time in Ottawa, and that's a whole nother can of worms. Yeah, very, very vocal about his about how he didn't try to play in Ottawa, but that's another can of worms. But that this is a guy, I mean, regardless of how hard he tries, he's a good hockey player. He's a damn good hockey player. And we traded him, we got our first round pick, got a prospect, but Kubalik is a big piece in that trade. That's a 20-goal scorer, could be a 30-goal scorer. And it would be a little bit crazy in my mind to trade him away because of a cap situation. That would be worst case scenario for me. I want to see this guy play. I want to see him get that opportunity on PP2.
Yeah.
We need to see him at least play some hockey.
Totally agree. Not many teams have, basically 30-goal scorers throughout the top six. Tarasenko didn't score 30 goals last year, but he's a 30-goal scorer. This guy's put up 80.
Vladimir Tarasenko, right?
Exactly. It's Vladimir the Tarasenko show, right? There's a reason for that nickname. You got 6 30-goal scorers in that top 6. That bottom 6 you have on that third line there with Pinto, who should come back. I don't see this being going through past October 11th opening day, just like Nylander with Toronto a couple years going into December. That's not going to happen with Shane Pinto. It's not that type of situation like Nylander, for example, which I've seen some people compare this to. There's really no comparison because the two are very close. It's just about making the space available. So losing a guy like Kubalik would be disastrous because then you have a bottom 6 again. Yeah, Pinto's fine, but he scored 20 goals in the top 6. Is he going to score 20 goals in the bottom 6? I don't know. I'll be honest. He's probably going to score 15, maybe 20. He'll probably get 30, 40 points. But if you remove Kubalik, is he really going to hit those numbers with some of the guys around him? I don't think so. So Kubalik, especially being a part of that trade, he gives you that needed scoring potential and depth in that bottom 6. Your only true sniper in the bottom 6. The only player in that bottom 6 who you expect when on the ice to put that damn puck in the net, especially on power play 2, when you have your entire top 6 on that power play, essentially, you want to have some goal scorers on that power play 2 as well. Kubalik's that guy. So when you're mentioning all this and you need to have somebody replace the penalty kill if Joseph's traded, once again, Yuri Smeshkal comes to mind. Power forward, big guy, hard worker, good skater, tall, big guy. He can block shots, can probably play on the penalty kill as well. That's why I'm really looking at a guy like Yuri Smeshkal, because you know what? I'd rather keep Kubalik. I know Joseph's a fantastic defensive player. He's a very good penalty killer, and I think he's a good player in general. He's going to have I'm not going to say a breakout year, but a bounce back year. He can't get any worse than last year. Injuries derailed his career, his season last year as well. He's going to have a bounce back year. But the cap situation means it shouldn't be with us. It should be with somebody else. Kubalik is better than Joseph for what we need. When you have other players on this team that can replace what Joseph has, like a Smejkal, like Sokolov can even potentially step in there. I know that sounds a little crazy, but he's worked on his skating. He looked fine defensively last year. And if you need a guy in that bottom 6 to give them a shot, maybe Sokolov's that guy. Because once again, he's not going to get into that top 6. He knows his NHL career is on the line. He will do what it takes to make this roster. So maybe he goes in there as well. Parker Kelly, of course, Zach McEwen. There are options for that bottom 6 penalty kill type of role. So if we're looking if we're looking at Joseph and keeping him because of these defensive intangibles, I agree. But you remove Kubalik, and now suddenly you're not going to have any goal scoring in your bottom six. Let's be
The
honest.
same team as last year.
Literally. And you could bring in Tarasenko all you want, and that's great and all. But this team last year struggled mightily, and the back checking of the top six struggled mightily because the bottom six weighed this team down. I can't say it enough. The top six carried this team on its back every single night. And when they were the ones producing all the offense on the power play or on 5-on-5, they were sluggish defensively for a reason. The bottom six has to step up big time offensively this year, take the pressure off that top six. Otherwise, we're going to be in the exact same position. So do not trade Dominic Kubalik. I'm very fired up to see this guy. He's got a great shot. I've liked him since he was signed as a free agent over there in Chicago as well. He's a good player. I think he's got a good attitude as well from what I've read. So we'll see what happens. Remember, we're recording this on September 24th. So we'll see, but Joseph's got to be the guy, in my opinion, to be dealt if you're looking at between him and Kubalik, because you can find another guy like Joseph. You can't really find another good goal scorer on that type of contract for that third line like Kubalik, in my opinion.
You just got to find a team to take him. That's all it is. And, I'm not giving up a first to lose Joseph, but, we've talked about it. We've talked about it, off camera, but you put a little prospect in there. Tyler Boucher hasn't really worked out so far in Ottawa, even though it would sting being like the 10th overall pick or 9th overall pick that we had a couple years ago. Shipping him out, that part would suck. But when you're thinking about competing now, Tyler Boucher doesn't really come to mind as someone who's going to help you compete now. That kind of seems like an attractive idea to me, to attach him to Matthew Joseph's contract rather than a first round pick. Absolutely not. I'm not trading a first round pick now.
No.
I'm with you.
When you think about the best teams in the league and how they have these cores that are locked up, you have your Tampa Bay Lightnings and you have your Boston Bruins. Those teams, and Chicago too, what they were doing so well at was keeping the players coming through, like refreshing their systems. They would trade their picks to get, some deadline acquisitions, but the young guys that they had coming up, that's what was making Tampa Bay able to lose all those guys in free agency. They had replacements coming up. You're losing guys like Blake Coleman and Barclay Goodrow. Great. Ross Colton right here, ready to go. And that's what Ottawa needs to do. And if you're trading your first round pick just to get rid of someone, that'd be brutal.
And I want to mention this because, Derek, I know you wanted to say something. Angus Crookshank. He's going to get NHL minutes this year. I joined
That's what I was going to mention.
Man,
I joined
I didn't want
the
to
Everyday SENS
ignore that.
podcast yesterday, and they were very fired up about this guy too. Firstly, elite name, elite person. He's a big time friend of the show, been on the show multiple times. Love this kid. He's going to get NHL minutes this year without a doubt. Next year, I think he's going to be a full-time NHLer. That's the dark horse, another dark horse, because I think because of his two-way flexibility, that gives him a better, chance. But at the same time, coming off a major injury, I do think that they would want to give him at least half the year to start in Belleville, see where they're at. But Crookshank's another kind of guy that, like you just mentioned, Noah, can be called up, can be a cheap option and an effective option. He's a guy that can score, but he's a pest. This is the type of guy you don't want to play against, but you want on your team. Absolutely love Angus Crookshank. And of course, we didn't even mention Boku Imama as well. Let's say it doesn't work out with Zach McEwen, for example. He needs some rough and tough kind of stuff. And, Josh Bailey or Igor Sokolov needs to be moved up to the third line. You can bring in a guy like that or a Matthew Highmore as well. So there's a lot of depth, like you mentioned, Noah and Derek, in this bottom six, in this system. But the high scoring abilities and the high scoring talent really isn't there. So Kubalik has to stay. Now, Derek, what were you going to say?
No, that's exactly. I didn't want to miss Angus Crookshank because I think he's really stood out so far.
Yeah.
And for me, when I watch him, his shot stands out. He has an unbelievable one-timer. He has a great shot. He's a guy that I've always kind of pulled forward to. He's always willing to come on and talk to people and come on to any podcast. Same with Sokolov. He's one of the most fun people, in the Sens community. So yeah, Crookshank, shout out to Crookshank, always pulling for that guy. He's always an underdog, but I could see him competing with Ridley Gregg for that spot. I think Ridley Gregg isn't a lock by any stretch of the imagination for that third line role. And there's some competition, there's some internal competition, but they do have to get the Pinto thing sorted out first, and then we can have a better idea about who the players are that are going to be competing. I would say, honestly, I think Josh Bailey has an inside track over Ridley Gregg. If you ask me today,
you can always put Ridley Gregg in the minors too, and have him, tear it up in Belleville with, I'm sure, some of these other guys that we're talking about. They're not all going to make the Sens, right? My one devil's advocate here that seems to be popping up. We have so many options for this third line. Pinto's coming back, right? Right? That's the question. Like, we have all these cap problems, and do you think that there's an outside chance that Pierre Dorion's trying to see if we can't get anything going with, moving Joseph, or is Pinto, like, heard the rumor. I don't think he's getting traded, right? Like, that would be,
I hope not.
That would be a disaster. And they're saying that we would get like a valuable piece back, but where? And if we're getting a valuable piece back, that valuable piece is probably making money. And if they're making money, then we're screwed.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah, it doesn't solve any
I just
problems.
wanted to bring this up for anyone who's thinking about, maybe we don't need Pinto. Yes, we do.
We do.
Yes,
yeah, the one rumor I heard was Philly, and it was actually both Pinto and Joseph in the trade, with Scott Lawton coming back, being the piece coming back. To me, that's a nightmare trade. That's revisiting Zibanejad, Brassard. No disrespect to Brassard. Obviously, came back. He was loyal to the team and played his role well, but he's not Mika Zibanejad.
We know who we traded away.
Yeah, exactly.
Look, Scott Lawton's
that would be a nightmare.
Bottom six player, but that would be an absolute disaster. I think Williams Martian even put out a mock kind of trade with Batherson involved. I mean, I don't know what the hell all the hype is around Scott Lawton. We don't need Scott Lawton. It's okay. We have enough guys like that. It's fine. Okay. If we want guys that can put in points, keep Kubalik. Now, I'm going to mention this quickly, just about, I forget who mentioned this, but I think Derek, you mentioned this about Ridley Gregg not being a lock. I do agree with that. He's still a rookie. Let's be honest. 9 points in 20 games last year, all assists, a few of those on the power play. Look, I think if they trade Joseph, he's a winger. If they don't trade Joseph, then you can maybe see him start in Belleville, because, I mean, are they going to put him on the fourth line? I wouldn't. So we'll see what happens with that. That's something to really follow. But I also find that, look, Josh Bailey's a fine player, but I think Sokolov, Ridley Gregg, these kind of guys are going to get a shot over him on that third line. So I'll have to see what happens. I also want to mention quickly, before we go to the third pairing, there's a lot to discuss with that as well, is Robbie Arventi. His name has been brought up. He's a prospect who was drafted in the second round a couple of years ago as well. He's starting at center today, which is really odd, on the fourth line against Toronto tonight, or this afternoon, with Yuri Smejkal and Igor Sokolov on his wings, pardon me. So I think Robbie Arventi is another kind of guy that you should keep an eye out for. Not necessarily to be on that fourth line, but maybe on that third line as, that kind of guy that can put the puck in the back of the net in the scenario that Kubalik is traded. So we'll see what happens. Once again, like you guys have both kind of already alluded to, the big thing holding all of this up is Shane Pinto. So until that kind of situation's resolved, we can keep on talking. But for now, we'll see what happens. But let's just say, like you guys have already said, there's quite a bit of options. Pardon me, got a notification here. Sorry. There's quite a bit of options here for Ottawa in their bottom six. Now, Noah, you were going to discuss the third pairing, and for 2 spots, there's 4 players. So why don't you break down that situation for us?
Yeah, we obviously know that we have a pretty solid top 4 in Ottawa. You got Zub, who kind of had a underwhelming season, to say the least. I was kind of a little harder on Zub last year than some others were. I love Artem Zub. I just, when you have a bad season off of the contract that you sign, it's a little bit concerning for me. But, we all had that whole defense core seemed to, other than Sanderson, just seemed to have an off season. So it's okay. We have a way better team all around now. We have a full year of Chychrun. That's going to help us. So speaking of, Chychrun's there. You're going to have Shabbat, who, a couple of years in a row now where he hasn't played his quite best hockey. But I'm fully confident that he can bounce back. Kind of like Zub, like we have a more stable team. You know, this is a whole connected group of guys who really want to win. Tim Stützle's talked about this multiple times about how this group of guys is special, and that's why he was signing so early his extension. That's why Jake Sanderson signing his extension so early, is because they want this team to be locked up and ready to go. That could help a guy like Thomas Chabot. And so you have that, and you obviously Sanderson, what can you say? He's so good. He's so good. And it's going to be great to see. I don't know exactly what the pairing is going to be. I guess it's going to be Chychrun and Chabot.
Yeah.
Sanderson, Zub. That'll be interesting because Zub's been basically Chabot's man for a long time. We'll see how that works out. But
and by the way,
yeah.
Just like you know, Chabot's supposed to start on the right side as well, and Chychrun on the left, I believe.
Yeah.
That's going to be really interesting as well.
Sure. Whatever works, honestly. People think it's like unconventional or it's weird. If we win hockey games, I don't care. Like they can look great with Chabot there and with Chychrun, that's fine with me. But I mean, it kind of leaves us. We have 4 NHL defensemen who can fit 2 spots. Jacob Bernard Docker, he's played sparingly, but you can't deny he's a first round talent. I like Jacob Bernard Docker. I think that if we didn't have such a logjam in that position, he'd be a shoo-in. Obviously, it's kind of looking tough because right now you have Eric Brandstrom, who I would say is the 5th defenseman on the team. I'd say that pretty confidently. They just sign him back for the 1 year. They're not going to sign him back for 1 year if he wasn't the 5th defenseman and he was just going to be sent down. And so I'd say Brandstrom has to be the lock there. He had an up and down season last year. I think he looked really strong at some points defensively. At some points, his 5'10" frame just didn't really hold up. Offensively, he sort of started to try to come out of his shell a little bit. So I'm excited to see Eric Brandstrom play. I really hope he's not traded, because to lose that, our 5th best defenseman, again, just to sign Pinto, that'd be ridiculous. So I hope that we don't even think about trading Brandstrom at all. Then you got Travis Hamonic, who, man, he's the man. I love Travis Hamonic. I love him, but I hate him at the same time. Man, he puts me through so much, Mr. Hamonic. He's a very valuable player. Everyone loves Travis Hamonic. He's a locker room guy, and he's going to get a lot of block shots, a lot of hits. He's very physical. Sometimes early in the season, I think Travis Hamonic was going through some not great stretches of hockey where I think I was talking with Brandon a bunch at the beginning of the season. I think it was if it was 12 games, the first 10, 12 games of the season, there was at least one goal where I can say, what the heck are you doing, Travis?
I remember those texts.
There were some bad plays, but listen, he got better. He got a lot better, and especially down the stretch with the injuries to Chabot, to Chychrun, it was good. And Zub to have Travis Hamonic there, because he was honestly at the end one of the more stable guys in the team. I would say right now my favorites to win that 5-6 spot is Brandstrom Hamonic. Especially again, they signed Hamonic back on this 2-year deal, 1.1. Yeah. You're probably gonna start him, at least give him the first look. But I would want to say that it goes without saying, you don't want to leave Tyler Kleven just out of there and not talk about him. He looked very good in his sparing time in the NHL. It seems like everyone's very excited about Tyler Kleven. I'm sure Tyler Kleven starts the season in Belleville. As much as I would love to say that he comes up and just becomes Jake Sanderson 2.0 and becomes this phenomenal defenseman right away, just let him go to Belleville. I want to see him in the preseason, but as much as I would love for him to start, he's going to be in Belleville. I don't think there's much doubt about that, unless something happens. to your Brandstroms or your Hammoniks, but it kind of leaves Jacob Bernard-Docker in this weird spot. I mean, he's had 3 NHL years now. You know, he played a couple games in 21, played a few more in 22, and then in 23 he played 19 games. He had 2 goals, 4 assists for 6 points in 41 AHL games last year. I'm cheering for him. I don't know where you fit him in. Maybe he's the 7th guy, but I honestly I'd rather have like not Nick Holden. I do not want him back, but like another veteran defenseman to fill that 7th defenseman slot. Like, I see value in putting Bernard Docker. But then you have to go through waivers. It's so tough because ideally I can have Jacob Bernard-Docker in the minors as well, and just developing with a lot of these great young players, because we're going to have a lot of guys down there. It's going to be a good team in Belleville.
They brought in some great players.
Yeah.
AHL free agency. Sorry to cut you off. I thought.
No, all good.
Yeah, they brought in Belleville quite a bit of high talent AHL players, high pedigree AHL talents through free agency. So Belleville's gonna be a great team. This is why I think Tyler Clevin, and I agree with you, should start absolutely in Belleville. And remember, Derek and I were talking about this before recording. Pierre Dorion mentioned him as a cornerstone piece to the franchise, as a big part of the future. When he does that, that means they view him as, of course, a big part of the future. And when they see players as a big part of the future, they don't throw them to the NHL right away. They put him in the AHL, let him over-marinate, let him dominate, let him get as good as he can, and then call him up. I mean, that's why we haven't seen Yarventi and Cruikshank up just yet. That's why only really Greg got a small addition last year. And even at that point, it was only because of injuries as well, let's be honest, that opened up spots for him as well. So this team is very conservative when it comes to development. And of course, that all goes back to Curtis Lazar, which I always bring up. They learned their lesson, and it never hurts to over-marinate your prospect. Obviously, like you mentioned, you're not going to have Tyler Clevin here in the bleachers watching as a 7th defenseman. And at this point, Jacob Bernard-Docker, look, Noah, you mentioned this yourself. This is a guy that was drafted before 2020 in the first round, okay? I think it was 2019 he was drafted in the first round.
2018.
So it's been 5 years. It's been 5 years. I mean, this guy is what he is. He's a fine depth NHL defenseman who can play a decent 2-way game, not much offense, won't stick out bad defensively, which is fine for the 3rd pairing or as the 7th defenseman. But that's it. He's not a top 4 guy, let's be honest. He doesn't have enough offensive ability, and his defensive game doesn't jump out of the screen that much to you to make him look as a top 4 guy, especially on this team right now. So I agree with you, Noah. I think Brandstrom, even if you trade him, and I've seen people mention Brandstrom as a trade option, I don't get it. You trade Brandstrom, you still don't have enough space for Pinto. So keep him. He's a cheap guy. He's young. You traded Mark Stone for him, and he's one of the best, and Derek, I'm sure you'll talk about this in a second, he's one of the best defensive guys in the team. He's an advanced analytic darling. So when you're looking at that bottom pairing, Brandstrom for sure is the 5th defenseman. He's earned that ability. He brings the offense a little bit as well for that 3rd pairing. And then Travis Hamonic. I mean, this guy is the hammer. I mean, for a reason. This guy throws the hits. This guy has a hammer, no pun intended, of a shot. He leads the team in a lot of important physical categories as well, which you need grit. Let's be honest. You need some grit in that defensive side of things. You need that on the blue line. Chychrun could bring that, but other than that, you don't really have that much. Hamonic can be the
toughest. It's not the toughest. It's not the toughest top 4 defensive pairings that we have. So you need a guy like Hamonic to set the tone. And honestly, I love Jacob Bernard-Docker. If I'm Pierre Dorion, I'm on the phone with every team. Hey, Jacob Bernard-Docker with Joseph. What do you think? That's what I'm doing, because I mean, 1st rounder, right? That's what I'm trying to sell a bag of magic beans, right? With Jacob Bernard-Docker. Hey, he's pretty good. It's, he's 1st rounder. Get Joseph too. Great NHLer for the whole price of future considerations. What do you say? That's what I'm doing if I'm Pierre Dorion.
Just last thing.
Yeah, I was gonna.
With JBD, I'll just mention this quickly once again. I mean, Tyler Clevin could be sent down. There's no roster implications. JBD's here on a 1-way. You're not going to lose him for nothing. I just don't, unless Tyler Clevin blows the walls off and is absolutely elite, it makes the most sense to start him in the AHL.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, you guys said most of it. I mean, the I guess, biggest strength this season is the defense. So this is a really good conversation to have. I think it highlights that this year is very different from last year in that the Senators have a lot of depth on the back end and a lot of good options, genuine NHL options that they could use on the back end. And that should get you excited. I mean, Hamonic, the only reason Hamonic really struggled last season is because he was being asked to do something he's just not capable of doing at this stage in his career. He's done it in the past, but he's not a top 4 defenseman. And, you know, he had the task of playing a shutdown role with a rookie defenseman in Jake Sanderson, who really kind of carried him through the season. So, with Hammer, I like where he's slotted. I think, you know, as a 6'7" guy who doesn't necessarily have to play every game, that's wonderful. You could get JBD, you could get him some reps. I do think you have to keep JBD unless you are doing what Noah suggested and kind of pairing him with Joseph to get Joseph out the door. That's an option. That's an interesting option that I don't think many people have talked about. And it was kind of in the back of my mind as well. So that would be interesting. Brandstrom's the interesting conversation. He's been a conversation for ever since he's got here, basically. Brandstrom's been a hot topic. And it's like some people either absolutely love Eric Brandstrom, and you highlighted it, Brandon, like the analytics community mostly, I would say, are, you know, on the bandwagon. And then on the contrary, you got the guys who really prefer having a physical presence on that. Certainly on the third pairing, you're hoping to have a physical presence, and that's Tyler Kleven. So I think if we're reading the tea leaves here, the Senators value Tyler Kleven as the long-term option, and Brandstrom was signed to a 1-year contract.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised if we get to the trade deadline and the Senators are looking to move Eric Brandstrom out. And I know they're hopefully going to be buyers. But I think at that stage, you might have Tyler Kleven, who's ready to come in and play. And I think the way the Senators might be looking at this is Eric Brandstrom is a really good number 5 defenseman for the regular season, and playoff hockey is different. And so when you start talking about playoff hockey, that's when you start to value big bodied defensemen who can also move. Like Tyler Kleven can move, and he can move the puck, and his head is in the game as well. Like he's got great vision, great IQ from what I've seen so far. Obviously, small sample. We're going to need to see more of Tyler Kleven, and I'm excited to see him at camp. But I agree with Noah. I think the bottom pairing is really solidified in Brandstrom and Hamonic. And knock on wood, unless someone gets injured, that's probably what we're going to see coming into the season, with JBD being the 7th defenseman, because they don't want to lose him for nothing. So that's how I see things playing out.
I'm happy with our defense this year. I think last year, you think about what we walked into, and it was an unproven Sanderson who we hadn't seen. It was no Chikrin at all. You had your Shabbat, Zub, and then you had Hamonic up there with the unproven Sanderson. You had Nick Holden slotting in. You had Brandstrom, who's like, oh, this is his last chance to do something. We are so much better off right now. We have Artem Zub still, with the down year he had, he's still Artem Zub. He has the hat for a reason. You have Shabbat. You have Jacob Chikrin now on a very team-friendly deal.
Yeah.
You have Sanderson. You know what you have in Jake Sanderson, a very, very talented defenseman, a freak athlete of a defenseman, winning the SENS, the athletic competition. Is that what they call it? Winning that. He was great in that. And then you have this depth of, you know what you have in Eric Brandstrom. He was probably at his best season last year, where he looked pretty sound. But Derek's right. I think playoff hockey might be different, and I think on some teams Eric Brandstrom could be a 4, and where you need that offensive defenseman, maybe a power play 2 kind of guy. Maybe he is that for some teams, but when you have Shabbat and Chikrin and Sanderson, he's not a 4 for us. And so that opens up this idea of shipping out Brandstrom with the idea that on some other team he might be on the top 4, but just here he's not going to be.
I'm glad you said that, Noah, because I was kind of saving this take for when we do hot takes or whatever we want to call it. But Eric Brandstrom's only hope of being a long-term Ottawa Senator is beating out Artem Zub this year, and then the Senators shipping Zub in the offseason. That's his only hope. I would say it's not impossible.
I
It would
agree
be
with that.
odd. He's a left shot. I mean, then you'd have a top 4 with all left shots in your top 4. So I don't know if you get hung up on that, but he's a guy who actually had a preference for playing his right side when he was younger. So that's, to me, it's an interesting storyline. If Zub struggles at all, I think Brandstrom comes in, or of course, if there's injuries, God forbid, to Shabbat, Chychrun, Sanderson, that's where Brandstrom is relied upon to now shift from being this reliable defensive guy to an offensive guy. I think there is a world where Erik Brandstrom becomes a top 4 defenseman, whether it's here or somewhere else. And I think that's the other piece that you highlighted there, Noah, that I had to jump on, because I really feel there's enough flash in the pan to suggest, plus coupled with the analytics, to suggest that Erik Brandstrom is having to play a role that he wasn't really meant to play. Like, if you think of Erik Brandstrom as the prospect, he was really this elusive, ultra-talented, offensive-minded defenseman. And what Ottawa's asked him to be is kind of the polar opposite. But now that he's grown that game, that side of his game, if he can add the offensive elements, this guy's a top 4 defenseman, and we're not even having this conversation. So there is a potential that can happen. And I was kind of saving that bit for a hot take.
And I think the problem, what we really have to realize here is, we employ Jakob Chychrun, and as much as Jakob Chychrun is a beast, he has a weird diet. I don't really understand it, but he's the man. But Jakob Chychrun hasn't played a full season in a very long time. Jakob Chychrun, it's not he's bound to get injured, but you have to be ready. Shabbat was not healthy last year. Zub had spent some time off. It seems like Brandstrom is undoubtedly gonna get some top 4 minutes. It's just the sad reality of it. And so this will be very interesting, because I've been a little bit disappointed with Artem Zub since that contract extension was signed. I love him to death, but if he needs to start playing like Artem Zub pre-contract, he needs to start playing like year 1 Artem Zub, because it can be very interesting, because I think there's other teams who are going to see this analytical Artem Zub, and they might think he's on a good contract or whatever. I don't know. It's an interesting time, but I think it's a good problem to have. This is a great problem to have. We have 5 top 4 defensemen, what it seems like.
It's a fantastic problem to have. No, even 6 if you include Clevin. Let's be honest, you should be in that conversation.
Who will be
by this time next year. What I will say very simply is Erik Brandstrom last year, as you guys both kind of alluded to, really took off defensively, and his physical game was so much better, especially in the boards, along the corners, or in the corners, pardon me. As a defenseman, that's where you often are in the defensive zone. You get crunched a lot, and quite often, Erik Brandstrom used to always get hurt along the boards and in the corner. Not last year. He was the one. Look, it was impossible to knock him off the puck. Let's be honest. He was very strong on the puck, especially along the boards, took hits, was never really knocked down easily. He's really worked on his lower body strength and his strength throughout his entire body, let's be honest. So for a guy like Erik Brandstrom, like you guys have already mentioned, if he gets that opportunity, and he did last year at times on that power play, he did start to produce. This is a guy that for sure on any other team, especially a middle of the pack, below middle of the pack team, would be a top 4 guy, in my opinion. He was a top talent back in the day for a reason. He's still a very good defenseman. The fact that 5'10" at such a young age, he's been able to completely just switch his style and become very good at that style too, shows the talent that Erik Brandstrom is. One thing though, when Bruce Garriock joined our show last offseason, he mentioned to me that Erik Brandstrom, and this was the same situation as this year, where he only signed for 1 year, was looking for multiple years, 3 to 4 years, and the Sens did not want to do that. Now, why is that the case? I don't know, but they didn't want to do it. And they didn't want to do it again this year and sign him only to 1 year. So no matter how good he is, the Sens clearly don't see him as a long-term part of this franchise, and he will likely not be here a year or 2 from now, which really does suck. But it's probably the best case scenario for Erik Brandstrom and his career, because he should not be stuck on the third pairing. This is the type of guy that should be getting second pairing minutes, power play 2 opportunities to show his two-way game. I think this is the kind of guy that has a lot of value. You don't trade him maybe I wouldn't trade him at the deadline, but at the same time, on a 1-year deal, you know what I mean? Like it's a tough situation. So we'll see what happens with that. But for sure, I just think once again, it's important to note the organization twice now has not given him a multi-year extension, and that's something to point out for sure.
I wonder, and this is just me thinking out loud, how much of an impact Sean Tierney will have on decisions. Yeah. And this might be one of those decisions, right? We talk about, analytics versus eye test, and really the reality is it's how they come together, and you have to take a fulsome view. And I fully endorse the fact that Ottawa doesn't want undersized defensemen or a full group of undersized defensemen. So you do have to be mindful of size and the success that you can have with size in the playoffs. And at the same time, kind of what I alluded to earlier, which was the fact that what you're talking about, Brandon, is that the Senators don't see Brandstrom in their long-term plans, but what if he forces them to? And that's what I keep coming back to. It's what if he has a season that's so good that now you're starting to question, like Noah pointed out, Chychrun or Zub. Like, if Chychrun can't stay healthy, does that make Brandstrom that option to replace him internally, as opposed to, we know how hard it is to hunt for a top 4 defenseman. It's nearly impossible. I don't know. I'm not going to write Eric Brandstrom off just yet.
Love it. With that being said, everyone watching this right now, let me know what you think in the comment section down below, as always, on everything we discussed, the 4th line, the 3rd line, and of course the 3rd pairing. But guys, what an absolute pleasure. And we're not going to review all the details, but just so you know, if you're watching this right now, lots more of this to come. So be on the lookout for that. But Derek and Noah, absolute pleasure to have you guys on. Derek, you go first. Where can people find you on social media and stuff?
Yeah, nothing aside from Twitter. So just at dlee075 on Twitter, or X, whatever we're calling it.
Call it X, I guess. What about you, Noah?
Yeah, just on Twitter as well. You can find me Noah_Luden. I'll be there.
Be on the lookout for these two to be joining us quite a bit, like I just mentioned, in the near future. And of course, contributing as well in writing form on senstalk.ca 2.0, which should be released very, very soon. Be on the lookout for that. But guys, preseason is almost here, a couple hours away from puck drop, game 1 against the Leafs in Ottawa. Quick prediction. How are we feeling? Who's going to win? I'll say right now quickly, Ottawa's going to win. Stützle's going to get a hat trick, and Yuri Smejkal is going to fight somebody.
He's going to fight somebody. Is he a fighter?
No, but he's going to want to make himself stand out, I think.
Oh, okay.
I can feel that. Either him or those two.
I haven't looked at the Leafs lineup. I don't know. I looked at the Sens lineup. I know we have the top line in there, and we're playing at home. Generally, in the preseason, when teams are playing at home, they do produce a bit of a stronger lineup. So I'll lean Senators for the win. But Brady Tkachuk actually pointed out the fact that they're not even really trying to win. They're like focused on a few details of the game. And DJ also pointed out the fact that they've added some things to the system this year. So I think it's going to be more trying out the system, getting used to the new systems. And that's preseason hockey. Like, that's what it's for. So I don't know. I'll take a Senators win.
I'll only roll Toronto with the win because we're giving them the win now for when we sweep them in the regular season. So they can have their taste of beating Ottawa now. And then it'll be all over. Brady Tkachuk and those guys are just gonna run them over for 4 or 5 games, however many games we have against Toronto. So give them the preseason win, no problem. I think we play them again in the preseason. I don't know.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow. Yeah. So hey, maybe we even split that. But let them get first blood. Think that they're so much better than Ottawa, and then we'll make them realize that Tyler Bertuzzi's a terrible signing and Max Domi sucks. But
we'll show them who wants it. Right.
Oh yeah.
There we go.
All right, lads. Always a pleasure, and thanks again so much. This was awesome. And to everyone watching, thank you for joining us. Always appreciate it. Enjoy the puck drop. Finally, hockey is back. Let's get it going. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll speak soon. Go Sens, go.